Thank you for joining this session presented by PriceFX. Today we are focused on the strategy and processes specific to ship and debit pricing. In the terms of PriceFX, our SaaS cloud-native software application, what we're talking about today is actually channel management. This presentation is scheduled to take about 20 minutes and we'll cover the following topics. First, I'll define several of the concepts related to ship and debit pricing by outlining the roles played by manufacturers, distributors, and end customers in the process, and explore the business environment where ship and debit strategies can be most effective. Next, what I'll do is I'll outline the kinds of pain points that are typically seen by manufacturing and distribution firms who are still utilizing manual processes for the claim processes. And I'll offer a view of what kinds of benefits can be realized when utilizing an integrated program or integrated program management and claim management systems like PriceFX. And lastly, I'll provide a quick look at how PriceFX specifically solves the claim problems with our Claims Manager module. All right, let's get started. So first, let's take a look at what we mean by claims. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about ship and debit or claims management? So when we're talking to leading firms at PriceFX that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, the kinds of programs that they're in, whether they're a manufacturer or in consumer packaged goods, maybe they're in distribution or a distributor or some other category, you can hear any number of terms that they define around these same common set of processes. They'll talk about trade and channel management, claims processing, ship and debit, payback, billbacks, chargebacks. The list just goes on and on. So when I think about this, the questions I look to understand are what exactly are we talking about here? Are we sending or receiving claims? What is the strategy behind processing these programs? Are we talking about claims management, or is this really about a different commercial process altogether? All right, so speaking of the commercial processes, claims are really just half of the equation. There needs to be some program on which you're making a claim. This can be in the form of a rebate program, it can be deal pricing or special pricing agreements, MDFs or marketing development funds, or even trade promotions. There's any number of programs that we're talking about here. So any program where the product has been sold into stock at a regular invoice price and some pricing exception has been made, where one or more of the upstream parties requires proof of sale or fulfillment or other program terms. That's what we're talking about here. So this serves to both validate the program terms and also makes whole the general ledger for all parties. That's really the point of ship and debit pricing. So these programs that we're going to be talking about, we most commonly see them when we're selling via distribution or via trade partners. It's also pretty common in high-tech hardware, in building products, and in CPG. So there's some other industries you might see it in, but those are a couple of the most common ones. All right, but just one quick diversion here before we move in to talk more about the incentive programs. I just want to ask a quick question about, why do we offer rebates or other off-invoice incentives in the first place? And, these kinds of programs that require us to utilize ship and debit processes. So first, I'd say you do this for pay for performance. This strategy incentivizes behaviors that you want from your customers and products. So you pay for actual performance, not just the promises you get from your customers or your channel partners. And you avoid the double impact of discounting, and you're not getting incremental volume that way. A second reason you might use one of these kinds of programs would be an incentive program like trade promotions to help you avoid price wars. So this is a way for you to make sure that the customer and channel incentives are not apparent to other customers. You can mask your channel or your OEM, your original equipment manufacturing prices for distributors and other channel participants. The third reason you might go down this path is around value incentive programs or around new product introductions, hunting strategies, MDF, again, marketing funds, and sometimes complex programs. So these complex programs are great, but they can contribute greatly to margin and also to good pricing behavior. And fourth, what this does is it helps keep prices stable. So rather than having fluctuation in your invoice prices, which a lot of the customers out there don't like, they want a more stable pricing environment. You can use rebates, for example, and that can be used to true up or reconcile prices where you're varying prices based on factors like an index. All right, so let's get back to the core presentation here. As I mentioned at the start, I'd cover some definitions early in the presentation. So there's a lot of information on the slide, and I'm not going to read each of these definitions. This might be a good point for you to pause the presentation on this page and read through these. And also the next slide, if you'd like to read those terms and definitions that we'll be using. But in general, I'll say these definitions include promotional terms like SPAs, MDF, channel terms like selling into stock and GPOs. These are all common within the ship and debit and channel pricing area. These are things that it's good to cover if you're not familiar with the terms. On the second page here, as I mentioned, I've also included terms that are more process focused. So these could include things like claims files, claim calculation and validation, also credit and debit memo, and so on. So again, this is a good time to click pause in the presentation, read through these. When you're ready to come back and join us, let's keep going with the program. All right, so you've read through all the definitions. That's great, and we're familiar with many of these common terms. Let's look at the overall process. So there's a lot going on in this diagram, and I'll break it down basically by row from top to bottom. So starting up at the top, you can see what we're talking about here is a manufacturer sells to a distributor at a regular list or full price. However, the manufacturer has a special relationship with an end customer. So like a retail customer, a GPO, or some other party. And so it offers a special or a contract price. And if the end customer can't buy direct from the manufacturer, the distribution sells to the end customer at the special or contract price, with the agreement that the distributor can claim back the difference per unit sold to the eligible end customer. So that, at a regular list or full price, the contract or special price. So the manufacturer sells to the distributor where it is invoiced into stock. So now at the second level at the process here, the end customer may request special pricing, and the distributor may work to negotiate price support on behalf of the end customer. A simple example of this process can be found in the building products industry. So for example, say a large builder or contractor is bidding on a project to build a 100-unit housing development. In order to win the bid project, the contractor approaches their HVAC or HVAC, their heating and air conditioning distributor, for special pricing on the heating and air conditioning equipment that they're required to finalize their bid on this project. And so they ask for a 5% additional one-time discount for this category of products in order to make a bid for the project that will comply with the job costing requirements. And without this concession, our contractor, they wouldn't be able to win the bid. And so no HVAC equipment would be purchased from the distributor. And in the same way, the distributor would also not be able to move this additional considerable volume on behalf of their HVAC equipment manufacturer. So in this case, the distributor approaches the manufacturer for a price concession. So based on the negotiated volume, the timing, and other terms, they make that request. And to make sure that this incentive is not being misused, the manufacturer will insist that they receive proof of the sale, so provided by the end user themselves, by the contractor, before any discount amount is transferred to the distributor. In these situations, the request for a price adjustment can be made in the form of a SPA, an SPA, MDF, marketing development funds, rebates, promotions, any other kind of program. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. And it can be initiated by anyone in the supply chain. So manufacturers could be offering price support for competitive or marketing purposes, and distributors and end users should be looking for support based on the commercial needs that they have. So now on the third level of the diagram, the end result is the same for any of these cases. The end customer is invoiced for special pricing. In return, they provide a claims file on all products that qualify for the special pricing. The claim is transmitted on to the manufacturer, who calculates and validates the claim, approves, and then ultimately issues the credit. All right, so there are any number of reasons, again, why any participant in the sales channel would want to use ship and debit claims processing. So, the things that we'll hear most common in the marketplace is this focus on increasingly competitive and unpredictable marketplaces. That this can really require an agile pricing process. So product that's already been invoiced into the inventory, it needs to also be flexible in terms of how costs are allocated and sold into the marketplace. So ship and debit, what it does is it limits risk to the distributor. So by removing discount programs that are not attached to specific negotiated purchase programs, it also decreases price transparency in the marketplace. And we talked about this a little bit earlier in the presentation. So from a manufacturer perspective, if I'm basically on the far left of that previous diagram or the top of the diagram, from the manufacturing perspective, maintaining a list price to the market while having the flexibility to strategically discount to specific customers for specific reason limits competitors' ability to counter with destructive counter discounting behavior. And it also keeps the discounting behavior invisible from one customer to another. And then lastly, the ability to support strategic sales programs like these MDF and SPA programs that we talked about. So the ability to support strategic programs to address the competition and the needs of the brand in the marketplace, it's really important. This kind of trade support is fundamental to maintaining, both harmony in the supply chain, but it also encourages margin in a way that's, encourages positive behaviors. All right, so before we take a look at the PriceFX fast and flexible approach to ship and debit, let's take a quick look at the typical current state for a manufacturer and a distributor who's not benefiting from automation in their programs. So maybe you find yourself in one of these categories, or hopefully some of these things will resonate with you. So from both the manufacturer and distributor view, there's a lot of, or any number of issues that you can cover here. So starting off, basically the manual issue. A lot of people are using Excel, other kinds of, manual programs. So the manual offline claims process, it's highly error prone to errors. In Microsoft Excel, it's not an ideal solution for most pricing needs, and that includes ship and debit. And so because of these manual processes, the entire sales cycle takes longer than it needs to. So in that case, one party is unhappy because they're not getting paid fast enough. And then also conversely, or on the other side, the supply chain can also be unhappy because of a long claims period and a lack of trust in the system, including duplicate claims and overclaiming. So, finally, the challenge for forecasting and then the measuring programs for success. This is key to improving these programs over time and identifying when to change policies in the future to encourage good margin behavior. So across the channel, whether you're a manufacturer or distributor, whether you're upstream or downstream from the claims process, if you're in this manual environment, there's a lot of benefits in terms of having automation, visibility, validation, and other components. It just creates a lot of additional harmony in addition to really meeting the needs of everybody across the different areas. So let's look at a couple what I'll call special cases here. So some other cases and what I'm calling special cases, they're also important to the process. So things like managing contracts for buying groups, managing fees for non-SKU line items, validation processing, and generation of payout schedules. These are all use cases that are really difficult to manage in Excel or other solutions that lack process and automation. So you end up, again, spending a lot of time doing kind of duplicate tasks and efforts, very error prone, and they're just not really well suited to that kind of environment where you have buying groups, where you have non-SKU line items, where even just the typical validation and generation of payout schedules, which is the core of ship and debit, it's a really cumbersome process that takes up a lot of time. So, right, when it comes to these ship and debit cases, the advantages with PriceFX. This is because PriceFX addresses these most important pain points that you're typically going to see in the channel management ship and debit environment. And these specifically include a couple key things. Number one, fast and accurate claims validations. Number two, the processing claims in any format, whether it's electronic or whether it's manual upload. Number three, around forecasting accruals and payout calculations. Again, that can be really complicated and error prone. And then number four, effective reconciliation, being able to reconcile those files as they're loaded into the system. And then of course, the very valuable visibility into these programs. So around eligibility, validity, exceptions, and the overall program performance that drives margin improvement. What PriceFX does is it helps you have that closed loop. So we see, the position program growth for the future. You see the benefits on a closed loop cycle from managing, creating programs to having the analytics and visibility in order to understand that you've got programs that are going to grow the business moving forward. All right, so let's get into Channel Manager, the Channel Manager module that by PriceFX, and just jump right into it. But first, just a kind of a quick look at PriceFX, the full suite of price management, optimization, and CPQ products. So PriceFX is a full capability suite of price management, optimization, and CPQ tools, including modules like channel management, contract management, SPA, special pricing agreements, rebates, and really a lot more. So in this last section of the presentation, in what we've been talking about already, we're really focusing squarely on the channel manager module, in combination to supporting things that could be managed and created out of promotion manager, out of rebate manager, but we're using the ship and debit capabilities focused in channel manager. All right, so I like to look at things in a three-step process, and this will be no exception here. So let's look at this three-step process when we think about channel management. First, within PriceFX, let's talk about the data elements and the platform manager. So this includes the bidirectional data exchange with your ERP system, with your CRM system, and any other what I call pricing-centric data or data systems, where the focus is around bringing in master data like product and customer master, transactions data, and of course claims types and claims data. Second, in this graphic here, we need to focus on the channel programs itself. And so this could be your SPAs, your special pricing agreements. This could be your promotions, your deals, your MDF, your market development funds, rebates, and any other programs. And then last, and most importantly, we'll focus on the actual claims process, where you create the claim types, create the validation logic, run the claims validation approvals, and release the claims records. Okay, so let's take a look now into the PriceFX process for ship and debit. As I mentioned, aside from the data, the first element is setting up a program. So in this case, we're taking a look at the rebate program that is set up with a claim to be made against the program. So here we have a revenue growth target rebate that includes specific targets for a customer and group of products. So on the bottom left-hand side of the screen here, you can see the input parameters where we've defined revenue targets for multiple tiers based on sales growth and what the rebate amounts are for each one of the different tiers that are achieved. There are actually multiple rebate programs or rebate types in this program, and we're just looking at one in this example where we've defined the claim type and format in terms of this rebate or quote or promotion. So this is actually the rebate manager where we're creating the rebate program, which we will come back and we'll do a claim back on later in the presentation. All right, now let's get into the channel manager here and really focus on the claims component. So before we can process any claims, we first need to configure the claim type. That's step number one. In defining the format of both the claims type and the format of the electronic claims file needs to be received by PriceFX. So you can see here we're defining the claim type format, whether it's a rebate or agreement or a quote or promotion or whatever it is. So you're defining essentially all of the different data attribute levels that the system is expecting to receive. This is here, it's sequencing the order, but from a calculation logic perspective, the order doesn't necessarily matter. We can always match based on whatever the file is that's being input. So now, once this is in place, a new claim is created in Channel Manager. So I've basically identified what type of claim I have. And what I've done is I've determined what sort of information or inputs or data that constitutes that claim file that I'm expecting. I now have a claim type that's here. So I can view an existing claim, or I can create a new claim by selecting claim type and entering the name there. All right, next, so there's a lot going on in this key step here, where in this next step, the claim file is being uploaded. So manually or automatically, you can manually push and upload for the file, or you could have a manual process that does this on a regular basis, on a nightly basis, for example. And the claims are automatically calculated and validated, including a summary of the process. So we can see for a specific customer on the top left, this 00114, that particular customer, they have a claim file that we're uploading against a program that they have in flight. We're actually selecting the specific claim file that we're uploading. In this case, we're doing a manual upload. It's not an automated process. It's just a bit easier to show this on the screen as an example. And so as this is loaded in, then we have the automatic validation of the claim, including overriding. So you can see we've actually just loaded in 3 line items. It's a very simple example where we've created this claims file. And you can see there are 3 claims that are loaded in. There are 2 that auto-validated on the number 1 and number 3, and then number 2 in the middle it actually auto-rejected because in this case, it looks like the claim of $600 actually exceeds the rebate amount of $511. So it's saying you're claiming more than is available for the rebate. This is obviously invalid. So there's that automation that's in place there. All right, so again, before the claim can be approved, any invalid claims, like the one that we just talked about, it needs to be reviewed. So manually or automatically, and it can be overridden as needed. So in this next process here, the processing or validation step is there to make sure that there's no overpayments, no missing documentation, no other issues with the claims or any other part of the overall program. So just like we said, this is meant to really enforce the different claims processes or payout processes that you have put in place specifically for this program. You don't want to be overpaying based on any promises that you made. You don't want to be underpaying. You don't want to make the process go too long or have any other kind of, maybe having something, products that are being claimed that are not members of that specific program, right? So you need to validate and make sure exactly what's being asked for is correct and that you're paying out exactly and only what it is that you need to pay out. And you want to do that as quickly as possible. So like I mentioned, you can see here in the middle where we have the override claim value to trigger an auto approval. That's the one we talked about where the claim is actually higher than what was there. So I could simply manually override that, change that 600 to a 500, and that will, basically, kick off the review process again and automatically approve that. Or I could simply just manually approve the claim itself and say, you know what, that's fine. It looks like it's wrong, but it's okay. So there's a couple different ways to think about that in terms of, number one, just overriding it, maybe making the change in the file and reloading the file, or just doing a manual intervention and override on that. And in this case, when we talk about the claims file too, there's always an approval process. So any changes that you're making here, whether it's an override, can have some oversight. And I think we'll be talking about that next. So finally here, we have, with all the claims validated, an approval process is kicked off. And you can see this final approval step, which again can be automatic or it can be manual, is an additional checkpoint in the process. All right, so after the claim is approved, a claim file is generated and the claims are ready for payment. So here you're routing for approval, whether it's a one-step approval, two-step, three-step, five-step. That can be defined within the PriceFX system to meet whatever your specific business rules are around claims processing and approvals, in terms of how many people need to view and approve that, and what kind of stages or what constitutes the requirement for an approval. So you can see this is really just a simple one step that's showing routing for approval. I'll kick that off. It'll send out a note into my Outlook, into my email as an approval. I'll receive that. I can review it and then I can approve the claim, or I can come into the PriceFX system and do that way. There's again a couple of different ways that I can view the different approvals that are queued up in my system in order to approve any claims that, as an approver, I need to take a look at. All right, so finishing up this whole process, we have a claims dashboard in addition to inline analytics and alerting and other reports. And this will help manage the claims programs more effectively and provide visibility into the process at every step. So most companies will want to track specific KPIs, right? To see, that there's quality in every step, including turnaround time, claims backlogs, matching statistics, other KPIs. And forecasts can also be maintained to provide visibility for financial accruals and also give real-time checkpoints on program and customer performance. So KPIs can even be shared with channel partners to let them know what to expect in terms of payments, as well as also provide visibility to their specific performance and current level of program achievement. So you can have your internal KPIs for your program results, for financial forecasting and tracking. And what's really nice is you can share these back out to your channel partners so they can have visibility in terms of where they are in the payment process. And last but not least, the evaluation of these programs to measure success and the need to expand, to cancel, to renew, or modify a given program. This is critical to the process. So being able to have, information around ROI, around your return on investment in your programs and your claiming activities is critical to improving your business over time. So having those as part of your KPIs, again, to close the loop on the whole process as you review your annual programs, or if you have quarterly or more frequent programs, can be really important. Well, all right, so we're about at the end here, and so I hope you found this presentation useful in learning more about ship and debit. So where we outline concepts related to ship and debit pricing, around roles played by manufacturers, distributors, and customers in the process. So we explored the business environment and then where ship and debit strategies can be most effective. So I outlined the kind of pain points that are typically seen by manufacturer and distributor firms who are still utilizing a manual process for their claims, and I offered a view of what kinds of benefits you might be able to realize by using an integrated program management and claims management system like PriceFX. So, and finally, we took a quick look at how PriceFX specifically solves these claims problems with our version of ship and debit automation in management, in terms of those problems with our claim manager module. What I wanted to do before we finally wrap up is I've got a number of questions that we got in, and I wanted to address those specifically. So I can go through these one by one, and these are questions that I'll hear commonly, but ones that I've just heard recently as well here that it'd be nice to address, and I'll go through maybe I don't know, 4 or 5 of these. So the first quick question that we have, just to wrap up here, that maybe you have one similar to this, is, so the question here is, can PriceFX automate claim intake and cleanse the incoming data? So the answer to that is, well, yes. So claims can be imported in a template-based format that we showed already by claim type so that they're ready for claim validation process. Okay, pretty straightforward question. Let's move on to the second one. So in the presentation, I see the use of Rebate Manager to define SPA agreements. Can I define multiple entities on an agreement? Good question. And then for example, in my SPAs, I need a distributor or multiple distributors and specific end customers or multiple customers. Good question, a lot of complexity there. So the short answer is yes. So depending on the rebate type selected in Rebate Manager, the input parameters include the selection of the partners involved in the agreement, such as the distributors and end customers. And so like I mentioned, one of the nice aspects here of PriceFX is the ability to be able to include buying groups, multiple customers, multiple products. So in terms of one-to-many relationship, one customer, many customers, one distributor, multiple distributors. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of how that works. All right, last question on this page, and looks like we have a couple more after this. So PriceFX can handle ship and debit from the distributor point of view, but can you track and manage vendor rebates as well, like rebates received from vendors as a distributor? Okay, interesting question. Again, the answer here is yes. So PriceFX can manage incoming rebates using Rebate Manager. Pretty straightforward there. Let's just take a couple more here and then we'll wrap up. So the first one on this page here is, can fields be color-coded at the claim validation step based on rules, and can I filter to find a claim? So this really gets to kind of some usability issues here. How do I find claims based on certain conditional formatting, or how can I filter and find the ones that I'm looking for based on exception? So that's an important one that can be interesting using any kind of software program. So the answer here is yeah, fields can be color-coded based on calculation logic and tolerance rules. And then also the approval workflow levels can be triggered by the calculation logic in the claim. And you can also filter the claims based on any attribute using simple filtering enabled throughout the PriceFX modules. And so anything within PriceFX, we can do that kind of conditional formatting and allow complex filtering in order to find the specific claims or whatever it is that you're looking for within the system using any of the data attributes that are actually available in the data cube in PriceFX. All right, I think this might be the last question and then we'll wrap it up. So that's good. The question is, how does the system calculate a claim amount? Yeah, so that's a good question. And really there are multiple ways to do this. Really, there's two primary ways we think about this. So there are really two ways the system calculates the claim amounts for two different purposes. So number one, the system uses current historical transactional data to calculate accrual amounts against ship and debit agreements to allow the finance teams to set aside funds accordingly for when your partner claims what they are owed. Pretty standard process in terms of what that allows you to do. Option number two here that we'll typically see is the system calculates actual claim amounts using the partner submitted claim in reference to the rules on the ship and debit agreement that it's tied to. So those are really the two primary ways that we think about that. There could be other ways of doing that. But again, it's when we think about the speed and flexibility of the system, whether that's the calculation logic or what inputs are defined, really, you, the customer, you're the boss, right? So there's no universal way of doing this. We can configure the system to meet the specific needs around incentive programs, rebates, and of course, ship and debit claims management, channel management as well. Well, so that's about it for this presentation. We're at the very end. So if you'd like to learn more about ship and debit pricing from the PriceFX Channel Manager module, a great place to look would be on our website for more information about PriceFX or to request an introduction to our expert team about our industry-leading SaaS cloud-based pricing management, optimization, and CPQ software. So thank you for joining our program today, and we hope to be hearing from you soon to answer any questions you might have around ship and debit. Thank you.